Throughout human history, there have been events that challenge everything we think we know about reality. Today, we're exploring one of those stories, a mystery hidden in the mountains of New Mexico that connects Native American history with government secrets and unexplained encounters that continue to this day. In the mid-1800s, the Jicarilla Apache tribe was fighting for their survival. After the United States took over New Mexico in 1848, these people were being forced off their ancestral lands. The government and white settlers were pushing them further and further into the harsh, mountainous regions where survival was nearly impossible. The Jicarilla Apache had a fierce leader named Chief Garfield. He wasn't just angry about losing their land. He was strategic. Garfield told his warriors that for every Apache killed, they would take 10 white lives in return. But he also knew the harsh truth. No matter how good they were at fighting, the endless stream of settlers would eventually overwhelm them. By 1854, after a major battle with the U.S. Army, the Jicarilla were defeated and forced onto a tiny piece of land in northern New Mexico under something called the Maxwell Land Grant. Their population dropped from thousands to fewer than 1,000 people by 1900. It was during this desperate time that something extraordinary happened. As the Jicarilla were being pushed onto the barren Archuleta Mesa, they were looking for caves and hiding places in the rocky terrain. What they found were large openings in the mountain that led deep underground, much deeper than any normal cave should go. When the Apache warriors first entered these caves, they discovered something that shouldn't have existed. The upper levels were natural rock formations, but as they went deeper, they found rooms and corridors that were clearly built by someone. The walls became smooth and polished. There were chambers so large you could fit entire buildings inside them. And the strangest part, whoever built this place wasn't human-sized. The doorways, the stairs, the work areas were all built for much smaller beings. But the Apache weren't alone down there. Deep in the underground complex, they encountered creatures that were unlike anything in their traditional stories or experiences. These beings were small, maybe 4 feet tall, with thin bodies, large heads, and huge black eyes that seemed to take up most of their faces. The Apache had no context for what these things were, but they knew they didn't belong in their world. What happened next was a war unlike any other in Apache history. The battle raged through multiple levels of the underground facility. The Apache fought with everything they had: knives, arrows, war clubs, and later, when they could get them, rifles and pistols they'd taken from white soldiers and settlers. The small beings fought back with weapons the Apache had never seen, devices that could burn or paralyze a man without making a sound. The fighting was brutal and went on for days. Apache warriors would venture into the depths, and many never came back out. Those who did return told stories of corridors lined with strange glowing panels, rooms filled with incomprehensible machinery, and these small beings who seemed to vanish and reappear at will. The Apache left bodies of their fallen warriors down there, along with spent ammunition, broken weapons, and blood-stained clothing. Eventually, the Apache retreated from the deeper levels, but they never forgot what they'd found. The tribal elders decided that some knowledge was too dangerous to share widely, so the full story of the underground war was told only to a select few. Most of the tribe knew only that there were evil spirits in the deep caves of Archuleta Mesa, and that those places should be avoided. Fast forward to 1938. President Franklin Roosevelt is getting reports about Nazi Germany's rocket technology, and he's worried. The world is heading toward war, and America needs to catch up fast, especially with nuclear weapons. Roosevelt puts together a top-secret project that will eventually become the Manhattan Project. But first, they need to find a place to build and test these weapons, somewhere remote, secure, and far from prying eyes. This is where the Morka expedition comes in. Named after Morka Army Airfield in California, where they launched from. This was a special military team tasked with finding the perfect location for America's nuclear program. The team wasn't just soldiers. They had geologists to study the rock formations, archaeologists to check for historical sites, structural engineers to see if the ground could support massive facilities, and specialized military personnel, including sharpshooters and climbers who could handle the rough terrain. In 1940, this team was sent to explore the Archuleta Mesa area in northern New Mexico. The location seemed perfect: high altitude, remote, sparse population, and the right kind of geology for underground testing. What they didn't expect was to stumble into the same cave system the Apache had discovered 70 years earlier. When the Morka team first entered the caves, they thought they'd found some kind of German spy base. Remember, this was 1940, and Germany was America's biggest threat. The technology they found was so advanced compared to anything they knew that their first assumption was that Nazi scientists had somehow built a secret facility in the American Southwest. But as they explored deeper, that theory fell apart. The dust and cobwebs on the equipment showed this place had been abandoned for decades, maybe longer. And the technology wasn't just advanced, it was completely alien to anything humans had developed. On the upper levels, they found what looked like giant television screens, but in 1940, TV was still experimental and the screens were tiny. These were wall-sized displays that could somehow project images without any visible projector. There were machines that looked like typewriters but had keyboards with symbols no one could read. Cables ran along the floors and walls, not the thick, rubber-coated wires they were used to, but thin black cables filled with hair-like fibers that glowed with different colors of light. Even though some of these cables had been cut, they were still pulsing with energy, creating patterns of white, green, and blue light that moved through the fibers like water. The control rooms were the strangest part. They found dozens of workstations, but they were all built for someone much smaller than a normal adult. The chairs, if you could call them that, were about the right size for a 10-year-old child. The control panels were low to the ground, and the spacing of everything suggested the operators had shorter arms and legs than humans. As the team documented everything, they started finding evidence of the battle the Apache had fought decades earlier. Scattered throughout the rooms were Apache weapons: knives with leather-wrapped handles, arrows with distinctive Hikoria fletching, and clothing items that matched what Apache warriors wore in the 1870s. They found Colt revolvers and Winchester rifles, exactly the kinds of weapons the Apache had acquired through raids and trades during their conflicts with the US military. Most disturbing were the ammunition casings. The team found both spent shells and unfired cartridges, all with manufacturing dates from the 1870s. This meant the Apache had fought a major battle down here, using up significant amounts of ammunition in the process. The pattern of spent casings suggested sustained firefights in multiple rooms across several levels of the complex. But others showed injuries that didn't match any weapon the team recognized. Burns without any signs of fire, wounds that looked like they'd been made by some kind of energy weapon, and bodies that had been preserved in ways that didn't make sense given the age and environment. On the second day of exploration, the team went deeper into the complex and made even stranger discoveries. They found metal tablets covered with writing that looked similar to ancient Sumerian cuneiform, but more complex. The symbols were etched into metal that didn't rust or tarnish, suggesting an alloy that was unknown to 1940s metallurgy. As they descended to the lower levels, the caves changed completely. The rough rock walls gave way to smooth, polished surfaces that looked like granite but felt different to the touch. The floors were so perfectly smooth they reflected light like mirrors. And strangest of all, the walls themselves provided light. Not from any visible source, but the wall material itself glowed with a soft, steady light that illuminated the corridors without creating shadows. When team members touched these glowing walls, their handprints would light up brighter for a few seconds before fading back to the normal glow. Some walls responded to touch by changing colors or creating ripple patterns that spread out from where they'd been touched. In 1940, this was completely impossible technology. There was no known material that could do anything like this. In these deeper levels, they found more evidence of the Apache battle, but also something else. Among the Apache remains, they discovered smaller bodies, much smaller. The team's report described humanoid creatures about 4 feet tall, with thin, almost skeletal bodies, and skulls that were proportionally much larger than human heads. The eye sockets were enormous, suggesting eyes that took up a significant portion of the face. These weren't human, and they weren't any known animal. The bone structure was similar to humans, but scaled down and modified in ways that suggested a completely different evolutionary path. Some of these smaller bodies showed clear signs of violence: arrow wounds, knife cuts, and what appeared to be blunt force trauma from Apache war clubs. The evidence painted a clear picture. Sometime in the 1870s, the Hicoria Apache had discovered this underground facility, encountered its non-human inhabitants, and fought a war that lasted long enough for both sides to take significant casualties. The Apache had eventually withdrawn, but not before leaving behind dozens of their own warriors and killing an unknown number of the facility's original occupants. After the Morka team returned to the surface and filed their classified reports, the location was immediately put under military control. The official story was that they'd found suitable geology for nuclear testing, which became the cover for the Los Alamos facility that was built nearby. But according to whistleblower accounts that emerged decades later, the underground complex beneath Archuleta Mesa became something much more secretive. Over the years, people claiming to have worked at or near the facility have come forward with additional details. Paul Benowitz, a physicist and inventor who lived near the area, spent years documenting strange lights and aircraft movements around Dulce and Archuleta Mesa in the 1970s and 1980s. He claimed to have intercepted radio transmissions that suggested ongoing operations at an underground base. Benowitz died in 2003, but not before sharing his research with others in the UFO community. Phil Schneider was a geologist and structural engineer who claimed to have worked on underground military facilities, including one at Dulce. In public speeches in the 1990s, he described accidentally breaking through into an occupied section of the underground complex during construction work. According to Schneider, he encountered the same type of small beings the Apache had fought, and a gun battle ensued that left several humans and non-humans dead. Schneider showed scars that he claimed came from this encounter. He was found dead in his apartment in 1996 under circumstances that his supporters consider suspicious. These accounts, along with others, were compiled and analyzed in Anthony Sanchez's 2010 book, UFO Highway. The book connects the historical Apache encounters with modern claims about ongoing operations at Dulce, suggesting that the underground facility has been continuously occupied and that some kind of agreement or working relationship exists between human military personnel and the non-human inhabitants. What makes these stories more interesting is that they don't exist in isolation. The Hopi tribe has traditional stories about ant people who live underground and help their ancestors survive great disasters. The Navajo have legends about beings who live beneath the earth and occasionally interact with humans. Many Apache tribal stories include references to star people and underground dwellers, though the full details of these stories are often kept within the tribal community. Today, if you visit Dulce, New Mexico, you'll find a small town of about 2,800 people, mostly Hickory Apache. And if you talk to the locals, you'll hear something remarkable. Virtually everyone in town has seen UFOs, not just once or twice, but regularly. They describe objects that move silently across the sky, often at night, following flight paths that take them directly over Archuleta Mesa before disappearing into the mountainside. These sightings aren't random. Local residents report that the objects follow predictable patterns, often appearing around the same times and following the same routes. Some witnesses describe seeing the objects emerge from the mesa, fly circuits around the area, and then return to the same general location where they seem to vanish into the mountain. The Hickory Apache who live in Dulce today are the descendants of the same people who fought that underground war in the 1870s. Many of them still remember stories passed down from their grandparents and great-grandparents about the battles beneath the mesa. While they don't usually share these stories with outsiders, the combination of historical tribal knowledge and ongoing UFO sightings creates a unique perspective on what might be happening in their backyard. So, what are we looking at here? There are several possibilities. and the truth might involve elements of all of them. We could be seeing how historical trauma and cultural memory get transformed into modern folklore, with the very real suffering of the Apache during the 1800s being reinterpreted through the lens of contemporary UFO beliefs. We might be looking at a genuine historical encounter between Native Americans and non-human entities that has been covered up by government secrecy, with ongoing operations at the site being hidden behind national security classifications. It's possible that there really is an underground military facility at Dulce, but that the non-human elements are either misidentified conventional technology or deliberate disinformation designed to discredit legitimate questions about secret government activities. Or we could be confronting something genuinely anomalous, evidence of non-human intelligence that has been present on Earth far longer than we've imagined, with the Archuleta Mesa complex representing just one of many such sites around the world. What we can say for certain is that the Hickoria Apache experienced something traumatic and extraordinary in the 1800s, that government teams found something unusual in the area in 1940, and that residents of Dulce continue to report unexplained phenomena today. Whether these events are connected by a continuous non-human presence, by ongoing government operations, or by the powerful influence of cultural memory and modern mythology, they represent one of the most intriguing mysteries in American history. The story of Archuleta Mesa challenges us to think carefully about how we evaluate unusual claims, especially when they involve marginalized communities whose experiences have often been dismissed or ignored. It also reminds us that some of the most important questions about our world might be found not in academic institutions or government laboratories, but in the stories and experiences of people whose lives have been touched by the unknown.